Remove their home from the map, High Arbiter Valor Thanes said, and with one lazy motion of his silver hand, Earth disappeared from the stars. The Grand Council chamber did not gasp. It applauded. 10,000 alien delegates rose beneath the glass dome of Ver Prime, their robes whispering, their jeweled collars flashing, their translators turning cruelty into polite ceremony. On the enormous galactic display behind the tribunal, a red line cut around the Sol system like a wound being sealed shut. The label that had once read Terran Commonwealth flickered once, then changed to exiled species. At the center of the chamber, Ambassador Daniel Whitaker sat alone at a plain wooden desk the council had always mocked for being primitive. He was 58 years old, white-haired at the temples, wearing the same Navy suit he had bought in Washington 12 years ago because his wife said it made him look trustworthy. His hands rested on a worn leather briefcase. He did not shout. He did not stand. He did not give them the satisfaction of seeing his face break. But inside, something old and tired folded in on itself. 40 years of treaties. 40 years of funerals for human engineers who died keeping alien gates open. 40 years of smiling through insults because peace was supposed to be worth the taste of it. Valor leaned forward from his floating tribunal seat, towering nearly 8 feet tall, his blue-gray skin shining under the chamber lights. Humanity has been judged incompatible with civilized galactic order, he declared. Your species is unstable, possessive, territorial, emotionally reactive, and dangerously resistant to supervision. Effective upon ratification, every human vessel, citizen, asset, representative, and operating system will withdraw from council space. A murmur of approval rolled through the chamber. Daniel looked up at the map, not at Valor. Earth was still there, of course. A small blue dot beyond the red border. Oceans, cornfields, traffic on I-95. Kids waiting for school buses in the rain. His wife, Margaret, probably standing in their Virginia kitchen with the news muted because she hated hearing strangers talk about Earth like it was a problem to be solved. Ambassador Whitaker, Valor said, letting the title hang like an insult. You may speak before your species is removed from the record. That was what they wanted. A plea, a crack in the voice. Maybe some desperate human speech about friendship and shared futures. Daniel slowly opened his briefcase instead. The tiny sound of the latch clicked through the microphone. He took out a printed copy of the Galactic Accords, paper pages held together by a brass clip. Several delegates laughed. Daniel adjusted his glasses, found the section he needed, and ran one finger down the page. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm enough to make the translators hesitate. Just to clarify, Arbiter, you are ordering full human withdrawal from all council-controlled systems. Valor's thin mouth curved. Yes. Daniel nodded once. All personnel, all services, all maintenance crews, all navigation authorities, all emergency response teams, all licensed human-operated infrastructure. The laughter grew louder. Valor spread his hands. Every trace of your species, Ambassador. For the first time, Daniel looked directly at him. Not angry, not afraid, just deeply, painfully disappointed. Understood, he said. Then he closed the book. No one in that room knew it yet, but the council had just ordered the lock removed from the door that held the galaxy together. And Earth, after years of holding it shut with both hands, was about to let go. Valor waited for the begging to begin. He had studied humans the way rich men studied pests on property they intended to buy, and every report said the same thing. Emotional species, pack-bonded, sentimental, prone to dramatic last stands and loud speeches about freedom. So he gave Daniel Whitaker room to embarrass himself. He leaned back in his tribunal seat, folded his long silver fingers, and let the silence stretch until it became cruel. You have heard the will of the council, Valor said. Do you understand the mercy being offered to you? Daniel kept one hand on the closed book of accords and the other on his briefcase handle. The chamber cameras floated closer, hungry for his face. Somewhere behind those lenses, Earth was watching. His wife was watching. Every human ship captain, nurse, teacher, dock worker, and kid who had ever looked up at the stars and believed there was a place for them out here was watching. Daniel knew that if his voice shook, they would replay it forever. So he gave the galaxy nothing it could use against them. I understand the order, he said. A ripple of amusement moved across the upper galleries. Valor tilted his head. That is not what I asked. It is the only part that matters. The laughter faded a little. Daniel opened the Accords again, turned 3 pages, and tapped a paragraph with one finger. Article 9, Section 12. Forced withdrawal of a member species requires a minimum evacuation window of 72 standard hours, unless the Council declares active hostilities. Are you declaring hostilities? Vaylor's smile thinned. He had expected poetry, not paperwork. Humanity is being expelled, not attacked. Good, Daniel said. Then 72 hours applies. Do not mistake procedure for dignity, Ambassador. I never do. That landed harder than Daniel meant it to. A few delegates stopped whispering. Minister Selena Roth, seated 2 tiers below the tribunal, leaned forward with concern flickering across her violet face. She had worked with human negotiators before. They joked too much when things were uncomfortable. They asked for coffee at strange times. They apologized to machines when they bumped into them. But this was different. Daniel was not stalling. He was confirming something. Vaylor did not see it. You will remove your embassies, he said. Your merchant fleets. Your private contractors. Your military advisors. Your medical missions. Your technicians. Your teachers. Your mechanics. Your ridiculous little cultural centers with baseball games and fried food festivals. All of it. Daniel looked at him steadily. All human-operated infrastructure as well. Yes, Vaylor snapped. How many times must I say it? Daniel paused just long enough for the chamber to hear itself breathing. Once is enough. He took a black fountain pen from inside his jacket. It had belonged to his father, a courthouse clerk in Richmond who taught him that people revealed themselves by what they were willing to sign. Daniel placed the confirmation document flat on the desk. For 1 second, he saw the faces behind the policy. The nurse on Marrow Station who had delivered alien babies for 20 years. The old gate engineer from Kansas who sent Christmas cards to a species that did not celebrate Christmas. The human schoolteacher on Lyra 9 whose students would come to class tomorrow and find her chair empty. His chest tightened. He signed anyway. Not because it did not hurt. Because it did. Vaylor watched the pen move and mistook obedience for defeat. A wise choice, the arbiter said. Daniel capped the pen, slid the document back across the table, and stood. No, he said softly. A legal one. He picked up his briefcase and turned toward the exit. The cameras followed him, waiting for one final human outburst. They got only the sound of his shoes on the polished stone floor. At the doors, Celine stood from her seat and called after him. Ambassador Whitaker. Daniel stopped, but did not turn around. Her voice was lower now, less political, almost human in its worry. Is there anything you wish to say to the council before you leave? Daniel looked back at the thousands of faces that had just voted his species out of their future. He thought about giving them a warning. He almost did. Then he remembered every warning they had laughed at before. Yes, he said. Please read what you signed. Then he walked out, and for the first time that day, the applause did not start again. The order reached Earth 3 minutes after Daniel left the chamber, and by the time he entered the secure diplomatic suite on Vare Prime, every human phone, console, ship terminal, station board, school screen, and kitchen wall display across council space carried the same message from Sole Command. Return home. Bring what is ours. Leave nothing hostile. Leave nothing broken. Leave nothing human behind. It was not written like a threat. That almost made it worse. In the Terran Medical Wing on Marrow Station, DR. Allison Reed stood beside a recovery bed where a small alien girl with translucent wings had spent 6 weeks learning to walk again after a nerve disorder. The girl looked up at her with wide gold eyes and asked, "Are you coming back tomorrow?" Allison held the child's hand a little longer than usual. "I do not know, sweetheart," she said, forcing a smile that did not reach her eyes. "But I left your new exercise plan with Dr. Venn. He is very good." The child frowned. "But he does not sing the breakfast song." Allison swallowed hard. "Then you teach him." 3 sectors away, on Gate Relay 12, a gray-bearded engineer named Martin Hayes from Topeka unscrewed a brass nameplate from the main control board. He had installed it as a joke 12 years earlier after saving the relay from collapse with a coffee filter, 2 zip ties, and a string of profanity that the translator still refused to process. His alien assistant, Jero, watched from the doorway. "They said humans were only support staff," Jero said quietly. Martin slipped the nameplate into his tool bag. "That is what people call you when they want your work, but not your opinion. Can I come with you?" Martin stopped moving. For a second, The old man looked every year of his age. I wish you could, kid. On Lyra 9, a human teacher named Grace Holloway erased the day's lesson from a classroom board while 27 alien children sat too quietly at their desks. One of them raised a small, four-fingered hand. Miss Holloway, did we do something wrong? Grace turned around with a stack of books pressed to her chest. She had taught them English idioms, American history, basic algebra, and how to say please when the translator made politeness optional. She had taught them that people could be different without being enemies. Now she had 12 minutes to pack her life into 2 bags. No, she said. You did not. Then why do you have to leave? Grace opened her mouth, but the honest answer was too heavy for children. Because grown-ups made a bad choice. Back on Ver Prime, Daniel watched the withdrawal feeds alone. He saw embassy flags lowered, clinic lights dimmed, ship crews hugging dock workers who had pretended not to like them, human families walking through departure gates with pets, luggage, framed photographs, and the stunned look of people leaving homes they had built in good faith. He kept his jacket on. He kept his tie straight. He answered every call with the same calm sentence. Follow the order. Do not retaliate. Do not break anything that does not belong to us. His deputy, Maria Alvarez, stood near the door, eyes red. Sir, they are laughing at us on the council channels. Daniel did not look away from the screen. Let them. People are scared. I know. Are you? That made him pause. For the first time all day, Daniel leaned back and rubbed both hands over his face. He thought of Margaret in Virginia, of the porch light she always left on when he traveled, of the promise he had made years ago that the stars were worth the sacrifice. Yes, he said, but not for us. The 72 hours began to shrink. Human ships lined up at gates across the council worlds, not fleeing, not panicking, just leaving with the quiet discipline of people who had finally been told they were no longer responsible for holding everyone else together. And in control rooms all over the galaxy, alien supervisors smiled at the neatness of it, never noticing how many passwords, override keys, maintenance routines, emergency patches, and human hands were vanishing with them. Commander Rachel Monroe had never liked the main control room under the Rocky Mountains. It was too clean, too quiet, too far below the sun. 300 feet of reinforced concrete sat above her head, and still the room felt more fragile than the old farmhouse in Nebraska where she had grown up. On the wall in front of her, 9,000 transit gates glowed across a live map of council space, each one a blue point in the dark, each one carrying food, medicine, families, repair crews, school supplies, election monitors, emergency teams, and all the ordinary traffic that made a civilization believe it was permanent. Officially, the gates belonged to the Galactic Council. Everyone in that room knew better. They had been failing for 38 years before human engineers got involved. Earth did not invent them, but Earth had kept them alive with ugly patches, midnight fixes, redundant safety loops, and stubborn people who refused to go home until the numbers looked right. Rachel stood with both hands behind her back, staring at the map as evacuation clocks counted down in the corner of every screen. 49 hours remaining. A young operations officer named Luis Bennett cleared his throat beside her. Ma'am, Gate Relay 12 reports all human personnel off-site. They are asking whether to leave the stabilizer patch active until local crews finish transition training. Rachel did not answer right away. She knew Relay 12. She knew the patch. Martin Hayes had built it after a drift cascade nearly cut off 6 outer colonies. It was not pretty, but it had saved millions of shipments, thousands of passenger runs, and more lives than the Council ever bothered to count. Who was asking? Rachel said. Luis checked the message. Assistant Technician Jero. Non-human. Certified by Hayes personally. Rachel looked down at her tablet. The law was clear now. No human-operated infrastructure. No human oversight. No human emergency authority. They had been ordered out, and if Earth left one hand on the wheel, the Council would call it interference. Daniel Whitaker appeared on the secure screen a moment later, still in his suit, still looking like a man who had not slept since the vote. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. They had known each other for 20 years. They had argued over budgets, buried friends, drunk bad coffee in windowless rooms, and signed off on miracles nobody outside Earth ever heard about. Rachel finally said, "There are children on those worlds, Daniel." His jaw tightened. "I know. Hospitals. Heat shields. Food lanes. Passenger routes. You know what happens if we disconnect cleanly but completely? Yes. Then tell me we have another option. On the screen, Daniel looked older than he had that morning. Not weak. Just human. They made helping them illegal, he said. Rachel closed her eyes. For 1 second, she was not the commander of Soulgate Authority. She was a woman remembering her older brother, Mark, who had died in a gate control accident 15 years earlier, while keeping a refugee convoy from being stranded between systems. The council gave him a medal with his name spelled wrong. Earth gave his mother a folded flag and a quiet room full of people who understood what sacrifice cost. Rachel opened her eyes. Can we leave them instructions? Yes, Daniel said. Everything that is theirs. Nothing that is ours. That is a thin line. It is the line they voted for. Rachel turned back to the map. Around her, technicians waited without breathing too loudly. Nobody wanted this. That was what made it feel clean. Revenge had heat. This was cold duty. Transmit final public documentation to all Council Gate authorities, Rachel said. Remove Terran authentication keys. Revoke human emergency overrides. Package non-restricted maintenance logs. No traps, no corruption, no hidden failures. Louise swallowed. And the stabilizer patches? Rachel looked at the blue lights for a long time. If a patch requires human authority to operate, it comes home. One by one, across the map, tiny blue points shifted to white. Not dead, not destroyed, just no longer held steady by Earth. Louise whispered, clean shutdown initiated. Rachel stood perfectly still as Soul began letting go, and somewhere far beyond the red border, the gates remembered their makers by the sudden absence of human hands. For the first week, the galaxy treated humanity's departure like entertainment. Council news channels replayed clips of human ships leaving ports with cheerful music under the footage, as if evacuation lines were parade routes and packed luggage was proof of weakness. Commentators with polished voices sat in bright studios and explained that the Council had finally removed a dangerous emotional variable from civilized space. One anchor laughed while showing a human family carrying a dog through a departure gate. Observe the attachment behavior, she said, smiling at her co-host. This is why they were never ready for higher society. On Vare Prime, High Arbiter Valor Thane hosted a reception in the Crystal Spire, 60 floors above the capital clouds. Delegates drank luminous wine from floating glasses and congratulated one another as if they had lifted a burden from history. The galaxy has outgrown humanity, Valor said, raising his glass. The room answered with applause, softer than before, but still confident. Minister Selena Roth stood near the edge of the celebration, holding a drink she had not touched. Below the transparent floor, the capital traffic moved in perfect, glowing lines. Everything looked normal. That was the problem. Disasters in real life rarely announced themselves with alarms. They began with someone saying, "That is strange," and then going back to work. The first report came from Gate Relay 12, where Assistant Technician Jarrow stared at a yellow warning he had never seen without Martin Hayes standing beside him. Gate synchronization drift exceeded tolerance by 0.004%. It was tiny, almost insulting. Jarrow reset the monitoring stack, cleared the advisory, and told himself the human systems were being dramatic because human engineers loved building machines that complained early. 12 hours later, the same warning returned on 300 gates. On Lyra 9, Grace Holloway's classroom stayed empty for half the morning because the substitute teacher could not access the human lesson archive. The children waited at their desks, whispering the English words she had taught them, not because anyone told them to, but because routine made them feel safe. On Marrow Station, Dr. Vin opened the therapy plan Allison Reed had left behind and realized half the notes were written in plain speech for nurses who were tired at 3 in the morning. No elegant council formatting. No academic pride. Just reminders like, check her left wing before lunch. She gets scared if you move too fast. He read that line twice, then sat down harder than he meant to. In the outer shipping lanes, food haulers arrived late by 6 minutes, then 30, then 4 hours. Nothing collapsed. Not yet. But schedules slipped. Tempers sharpened. Storage tanks waited too long. Dock crews stood around looking at screens, wondering why every solution now required a committee. Valor dismissed the early complaints during morning briefings. Transition noise, he said. A civilization does not stumble because a few mammals took their tools and went home. Celine looked over the data spread across her tablet. Gate drift, medical delays, translation gaps, supply rerouting failures. Each item looked small by itself. Together, they looked like the first drops of rain before a flood. She turned to Valor and kept her voice low. Arbiter, we should contact Sol before this becomes harder to reverse. Valor gave her a patient, superior smile. Minister, Earth is waiting for us to panic. Celine looked through the tall windows at the beautiful, glowing capital and felt a cold thought settle in her chest. No, she said softly. I think Earth is waiting for us to understand. By the 10th day, the failures stopped looking like accidents and started looking like weather. They moved everywhere at once, quiet and stubborn, slipping through the cracks where human hands used to be. A hospital shipment bound for Marrow Station arrived 9 hours late because the automated routing system could not decide whether a gate with a minor drift warning was safe for biological cargo. The medicine was still usable, but barely, and Dr. Venn stood in the loading bay with the crate in his arms, staring at the expiration clock like it had personally accused him. On a cold colony called Brindle, where the wind could peel paint off steel in under an hour, the thermal grid lost its seasonal adjustment patch. Nobody froze. Nobody died. But families spent the night in public shelters, wrapped in silver heat blankets, listening to officials explain that everything was under control while their breath fogged in the air. On the diplomatic world of Karthus, a translation update failed during a water rights hearing between two species that had hated each other for centuries. One word came through wrong. Not a large word. Not a dramatic word. Just the difference between share and surrender. The meeting collapsed in shouting, and by sunset every news network in the region was blaming old grudges instead of the missing human language team that had quietly prevented that exact mistake for 27 years. Selena Roth did not sleep anymore. She sat in her office under the pale violet lamps, wearing the same formal robe for the second day in a row, surrounded by reports that would have looked harmless to anyone who did not know how systems died. One missed shipment was logistics. One failed update was bureaucracy. One bad gate calculation was maintenance. But 5,000 small failures, all leaning in the same direction, were not small anymore. Her aide, Tavin, entered with another stack of emergency summaries and stopped when he saw her face. Minister, he asked. Cancel my afternoon appearances, Celine said. All of them. The Arbiter expects you at the Unity broadcast. The Arbiter can expect whatever helps him sleep. Tavin lowered his voice. Is it really that bad? Celine picked up a school report from Lyra 9. Substitute coverage delayed. Student distress elevated. Human curriculum inaccessible. Teacher of record, Grace Holloway. It was not the most important report on her desk. It was not even close. But it was the one that made her chest ache, because she remembered Grace from a reception years ago, laughing while explaining why Americans brought casseroles to everything. It is not one disaster, Celine said. That is what makes it bad. Tavin looked confused. Celine stood and walked to the window. Far below, Ver Prime still glittered. Ships moved through the sky. Markets opened. Government towers shone. Civilization had not ended. It had simply become harder to keep alive. Humans used to stay after the meeting, she said. Do you remember that? I do not understand. After treaties, after repairs, after crisis drills. Everyone else went home. Humans stayed. They checked the backup generator. They called the second doctor. They asked whether the little planet on the edge of the route had enough fuel for winter. They made it annoying. They made it personal. Her communicator chimed. Another advisory. 3 food convoys rerouted. 2 passenger gates restricted. 1 emergency team unavailable because the nearest trained responders had been human. Celine read the message twice, then sent a priority summons to the Grand Council Technical Office. Minister, Tavin said carefully, what are you going to tell them? Celine turned from the window, her expression tired and sharp. The truth. On the screen behind her, the gate map flickered from blue to white in another dozen places. We did not remove a threat, she said. We removed the people who kept checking the locks. Celine entered the emergency session carrying 3 old paper folders, and that alone made the Grand Council uneasy. Alien governments trusted crystal archives, living memory banks, and ceremonial data streams that glowed in the air like sacred weather. Paper was a human habit. It bent. It stained. It forced people to touch the record with their own hands. Valor sat above the chamber in his tribunal seat, looking annoyed rather than worried, because annoyance was the last costume Pride wore before fear had to step on stage. Minister Aroth, he said, this session was called to address Earth's coordinated sabotage of Council infrastructure. I hope your report is useful. Selene placed the folders on the central table. It is not sabotage. The room shifted. Valor blinked slowly. Excuse me. Sabotage would mean they damaged something, Selene said. They did not. I have confirmations from 9,000 gate sites, 14 medical authorities, 82 shipping guilds, and the Office of Treaty Compliance. Humanity removed only personnel, access keys, proprietary software, emergency routing privileges, and maintenance systems legally registered under Terran jurisdiction. A delegate from the avian clade snapped. They crippled the gates. No, Selene said, opening the first folder. They stopped holding them steady. That sentence did what alarms had failed to do. It made the chamber listen. Selene spread the documents across the table one by one. Emergency routing contract. Signed by the Council. Gate drift correction agreement. Signed by the Council. Pirate lane stabilization program. Signed by the Council. Medical crisis response framework. Signed by the Council. Education and translation support memorandum. Signed by the Council. Each page carried the same quiet poison. If humanity was expelled, all obligations ended immediately. Valor descended from his tribunal, his robes whispering against the polished floor. These are technical agreements. They are the beams under the house, Selene replied. You called them technical because you did not want to admit we were standing on them. He snatched up one page, read a few lines, then looked toward the chief systems engineer, an old gray-skinned alien named Orvin, who had spent his life pretending human fixes were inelegant. Can we restart the full gate network without Terran authentication? Valor demanded. Orvin folded his hands. Some routes, yes. All routes. Orvin looked down. Not safely. The chamber grew very still. Valor's voice hardened. How long to replace their systems? Orvin did not answer quickly enough. That was the answer every delegate understood. Finally, he said, with full cooperation from all member worlds, emergency funding, and no additional failures, perhaps 18 months for partial stabilization. Partial? Selene asked. Orvin looked miserable. The humans did not build elegant systems. They built stubborn ones. They assumed operators would be tired, distracted, undertrained, politically pressured, or afraid to admit uncertainty. Their backups have backups. Their warnings trigger early. Their manuals explain not only what to do, but why. We copied the structure, but not the judgment behind it. Across the chamber, Minister Tavin stared at the map as another cluster of transit points faded from blue to white. Not destroyed. Not gone. Just unreliable. Valor turned on Selene. Then order Earth to return. Selene met his eyes. Under what authority? Council authority. We revoked their membership. Then under emergency charter. We banned their operation of Council systems. Then under humanitarian obligation. Selene's voice softened, and somehow that made it worse. We made their help illegal. No one laughed now. No one whispered about mammals or death-world instincts or emotional instability. The same delegates who had applauded Earth's erasure sat frozen behind polished desks, reading signatures they had never bothered to understand. Valor looked at the documents, then at the silent map, and for the first time since Daniel Whitaker had walked out, the Grand Council chamber felt too large for the people inside it. Selene closed the final folder with a small, flat sound. Ambassador Whitaker told us to read what we signed, she said. We should have listened before the gates started answering us in silence. The first message to Sol was written like a command, because the Council had forgotten how to speak any other way. It arrived through the dead diplomatic channel with Valor's seal bright at the top, demanding the immediate restoration of human technical access to all critical gate systems pending review. Earth did not answer. 6 hours later, a second message followed, longer and colder, accusing the Terran Commonwealth of reckless abandonment, economic aggression, and unlawful withholding of emergency services. Earth did not answer that one either. By the next morning, as shipping queues stretched for millions of miles outside half-stable transit corridors and local governors began calling Ver Prime directly, the third message lost some of its polish. It requested dialogue. It used the word partnership once. Celine read it before transmission and quietly changed partnership to assistance, because even now she could not bear the lie. Earth still did not answer. On the fourth day, Valor stood in the communications chamber surrounded by technicians who no longer looked at him with confidence. The Great Wall display showed the Sol border as a dark circle, quiet and unreachable behind its own authorization veil. "Send it again," Valor said. Orvin, the chief engineer, kept his voice careful. "Arbiter, the packets are being received. They are simply not opening a diplomatic response channel. Then route it through humanitarian priority. That requires Terran acceptance. Through trade emergency. Trade relations were terminated. Through military contact." The room went still. Celine turned toward him slowly. "That would be unwise." Valor's eyes flashed. "They are ignoring a galactic crisis." "No," Celine said. "They are obeying exile." The word landed between them like a closed door. Far away, on Earth, Daniel Whitaker was not in a command bunker or a marble government hall. He was in a small house outside Charlottesville, Virginia, standing at the kitchen sink while rain tapped softly against the window. The house smelled like pot roast, black coffee, and lemon dish soap. Margaret Whitaker sat at the table with 2 plates between them, watching her husband read the incoming council traffic on a secure tablet beside the salt shaker. For the first time in years, he was home for dinner and did not know how to sit still. "Is it bad?" Margaret asked. Daniel set the tablet face down. "Yes. For us." He looked toward the dark window, where his reflection looked older than he expected. No, Margaret understood him well enough not to be comforted by that. She reached across the table and touched his hand. "You are thinking about going back." Daniel gave a tired half-smile. "I am thinking about everyone who cannot." "That is not the same thing." He looked at her then, really looked, at the gray in her hair, at the lines around her eyes he had missed earning while sitting in rooms full of people who hated needing him. "They asked us for decades to be useful and invisible," he said. "Then they threw us out when invisible started to look too much like powerful." The tablet chimed again. This time the message header was different. Not a summons, not a threat. A personal request from Minister Selena Roth, marked urgent, private, and humanitarian. Daniel opened it. Celine's face appeared in a frozen preview, tired and stripped of ceremony. Below it was a short text. "Ambassador Whitaker, people are afraid. I know what we signed. I am asking whether Earth will speak to us anyway." Daniel read it twice. Margaret watched his face change, not soften exactly, but settle into something heavy and final. "Are you going to answer her?" she asked. Daniel stood, carried his plate to the sink, and rinsed it because some habits survive the end of history. "Yes," he said, "but not from the council floor." Beneath the Rocky Mountains, Rachel Monroe received his authorization 5 minutes later. She read it, exhaled slowly, and turned to her operations team. "Open a one-way Sol broadcast window. Civilian bandwidth. No command access. No gate keys." Luis Bennett looked up from his station. "Who is speaking?" Rachel looked at Daniel's name on the order and felt the weight of every blue light that had turned white. The man they should have listened to the first time. The broadcast from Sol did not open with music, flags, or a fleet of warships waiting in the dark. It opened with Daniel Whitaker sitting at a plain desk in a quiet room, wearing a Navy suit, a tired face, and the same calm expression the council had mistaken for weakness. Behind him stood no generals, no missile displays, no threats wrapped in patriotic language. Just a small Earth flag, a glass of water, and the signed order that had sent humanity home. Across council space, the signal appeared on every available screen. In the Grand Council chamber, Valor stood beneath the frozen gate map, his hands clenched inside his sleeves. Celine sat 3 rows below him, her eyes fixed on Daniel as if she already knew what he was going to say and feared it anyway. Daniel placed the council order on the desk, turned it so the seal faced the camera, and waited until the translators settled. "High Arbiter Valor, members of the Grand Council, citizens of the worlds beyond Sol, Earth has received your messages." The chamber held its breath. Daniel looked down once, not for drama, but because the words mattered and he wanted to get them right. "For decades, humanity served beside you. We repaired your gates, staffed your clinics, guarded your shipping lanes, taught your children, stabilized your routes, and answered distress calls from worlds most of our people could not find on a map. We did not do it because we were ordered to. We did it because when someone is standing in the cold, decent people open the door. Celine lowered her head. Valor said nothing. Daniel continued, his voice steady but not empty. You called that dependence. You called patience instability. You called restraint a threat. Then, in a legal vote, you ordered every human-operated system, and every human authority to leave your space. We obeyed. Completely. A delegate shouted from somewhere in the chamber, but the microphone did not catch the words clearly. Daniel did not react. You are now asking us to return under the same authority that expelled us. That authority no longer applies to Earth. Valor stepped forward, finally unable to stay silent. People are afraid, Ambassador. Daniel looked into the camera as if Valor stood across the desk from him. Yes, I know. That answer quieted the room more than anger would have. Fear does not erase choices, Daniel said. Consequences are not cruelty simply because they arrive late. Earth will provide public manuals, non-restricted safety documentation, and humanitarian advice through open channels. We will not withhold knowledge that can save lives. But we will not reopen Soul Command access. We will not return our people to systems where their presence has been outlawed. We will not allow our citizens to become invisible again just because the room finally noticed the lights flickering. In the Rocky Mountain Control Center, Rachel Monroe stood beside Louise Bennett, watching the Soul Gate pulse in deep blue. Louise whispered, "Final authorization is ready." Rachel did not take her eyes off Daniel. "Wait for his mark." On Vare Prime, Celine rose slowly. Her voice was soft, but it carried. "Ambassador Whitaker, will Earth ever speak with us again?" Daniel's expression changed then. Only a little. Enough to show the man under the office, the husband at the kitchen table, the diplomat who still remembered every bridge before it burned. "Yes, Minister Arath," he said, "when you are ready to speak to us as neighbors, not tools." He rested one hand on the signed exile order. "Until then, this is not punishment. This is the boundary you asked for." He paused, and for a moment the whole galaxy seemed to lean toward that small human room. "Take care of your people. We are going to take care of ours." Daniel nodded once to someone off-screen. Beneath the Rocky Mountains, Rachel entered the final command. The Soul Gate faded from blue to white, then from white to a soft, ordinary dark. No explosion. No speech from the stars. Just a door closing gently enough that only the people who had lost it understood the sound. In the Grand Council chamber, Valor stared at the empty place on the map where Earth used to be. Celine looked at the same darkness and thought, not of power, but of every quiet person who had ever held a door, fixed a problem, stayed late, or loved without applause. The galaxy had wanted humanity gone because it hated needing them. Now it would have to learn the lesson every proud heart eventually learns. The people who help you are not beneath you. Sometimes they are the reason you are still standing.